Hello from Newcastle in the Hunter Valley on the east coast of Australia. I'm Julie McIntyre and my paper is titled True Stories for a Wine Place, a world-first collaboration between historian, sociologist and tourism region. Before I begin, I would like to thank Donna Sanesi and John Hull, organisers of the Wine and Culinary Tourism Futures Conference, for allowing me to present this paper by video. I'd very much have liked to be in the Okanagan Valley to hear the papers that are being presented during the conference and to engage in the valuable networking and knowledge exchange that occurs at these meetings, but I'm just at a crucial stage of ensuring timely completion of outputs for the project that's the subject of this presentation. The project I'm discussing, there we go, great. Is titled Vines, Wine and Identity, the Hunter Valley, New South Wales and Changing Australian Taste. I'm going to talk about it in practical terms to reflect how we've worked with the tourism industry and what we've learned from this since beginning our partnership pilot in 2012 and the project proper in 2015. Vines, Wine and Identity is funded by an industry linkage grant from the Australian Research Council, which is the major funding body for all non-medical research in the Australian university sector. We received a total of $170,000 from the ARC, from the Australian Research Council, and this is a 3-year project. We also have some internal funding from the University of Newcastle to support a PhD student, as well as some additional research assistance. And significantly, the Hunter Valley Wine and Tourism Association has contributed $105,000 in total over the 3 years, along with in-kind support, which is in time and expertise from members of the Hunter Valley Wine and Tourism Association. The ARC project funds have been largely allocated to my time as a researcher, and industry funds have also been allocated to industry-facing outputs and to support some of my time. The other project partner, Newcastle Museum, supports the project with in-kind, that's time and resources, to mount a major exhibition as an output of the project. As far as we can tell, Vines, Wine and Identity is a world-first collaboration between a wine region tourism body, the cultural sector and researchers in the humanities and social sciences. This project is not only inter-institutional from a research perspective, it's interdisciplinary within history and across the boundaries between historical and sociological research. The project aims to concurrently produce new practical outputs for a wine tourism region and new scholarship in the disciplinary areas of the project team. The project team at the University of Newcastle is myself and sociologist John Germov. There were 2 other historians on the project at its inception, but for unforeseen reasons, no problems, just unforeseen reasons, they are no longer active members of the team. Professor Germov and I are collaborating to produce an historical sociological study of the Hunter Valley wine region from the 1820s to the 1980s, with historical research techniques extending from traditional and digital archival case studies to family histories, oral histories, and of course we pay attention to the work of geographers and other disciplinary specialists outside of our expert areas who've written on the Hunter Valley. The rationale for our study as an industry linkage grant is that we are solving problems for our industry partners. The problem we're solving for the Hunter Valley Wine and Tourism Association is that it doesn't have an adequate evidence-based understanding of its history and heritage as a wine region, and yet it is Australia's oldest continually producing wine region, and therefore its longevity is an asset. It has what we have termed historical capital, but does not have the skills to access and activate this capital as a region for branding or tourism. The problem we're solving for Newcastle Museum is that as the major cultural exhibition body of the principal city of the Hunter Valley, the museum is charged with exhibiting and interpreting the region's heritage. As wine growing is an essential element of Hunter heritage, Newcastle Museum requires expertise and welcomes industry involvement to interpret salient objects in its collection and to accession or borrow new material to mount a major exhibition of Hunter wine heritage. Many of the mythologies and misunderstandings about Hunter wine history that have become naturalised within the industry and among consumers are the result of poor historical research, and the industries we are partnered with are working with us to address this. Our application to the ARC was supported by historical and sociological literature, and we have a theoretical model to conduct our analysis We call it the wine complex, and it captures the continual interrelationship between elements of the wine sector. But for now, I'm going to focus on the practical elements of our project. This is where the Hunter Valley is located within Australia. It is a coastal lowland region with a riverine network named for the principal river, the Hunter. We are defining Hunter Wine Region socially, culturally and environmentally, as well as temporally and spatially. We have avoided assuming a preconceived or natural starting point or talking just about industry founders based on earlier and what we have found to be flawed research or based on hearsay. So we're giving a research evidence-based underpinning to what we're producing. The scope of our project is large. The time we cover is the 1820s to the 1980s, and although the Hunter Valley wine industry operates under formalised geographical indications, which is shortened, as you know, to GI, instituted in Australia in the 1990s and modelled on the French Appellation d'Origine Contrôlée system, and in fact required because in the 1990s Australia made a trade agreement with the European community that meant that it was required to have GI around its wine industry. So we preferred, rather than working backwards through time with the GI as the starting point for the spatialisation of our project, to historicise understanding of the space. The GI is too new to use as the framework, and the location of past vineyards and the influence of historical actors isn't quite captured by the GI. The boundaries of the GI are different to the boundaries of the historical story of the Hunter Valley. So we identified the need to think regionally and to move forward in time from the point in the past that we used as our starting point, and also not to be biased towards companies or brands. This is a map of the Hunter Valley as a complex of natural vegetation and soils. There are increasingly complex studies of soils in the region, and soils are an important consideration in wine narratives. So we refer to soils in our study, but we've done so through the prism of the historical actors in the historical record. As we're not geographers or soil scientists, we haven't attempted an analysis or a hierarchy of the most suitable soils for vineyards in the region. It's for individual wine companies in the Hunter to create their own specific narratives of soil types. Our focus is on the connections between people, so people with place. Let's now consider what our project is producing as outputs. We've staged and managed outputs to satisfy requirements for industry and disciplinary scholarship. So we're producing a coffee table style book as a monograph. So in this model you can see in the centre that the book is mentioned. So the book hits the mark for both of these kind of outputs. The project's oral history series is a non-traditional research output. It has the benefit of demonstrating to the members of the wine community where their memories reside. It gives a sense of coherence of community within the community, but it also, as I say, is a non-traditional academic output. We have produced more traditional academic outputs too, 5 journal articles and 2 book chapters in edited collections as a part of this project, and they will all be published by the end of next year. So as this model attempts to show at a glance, we have taken a histoire croisée approach to our research. What this means is that we've conducted discrete but interconnected or entangled modules of research that are asymmetrical in time and space. So the research in our articles and those chapters that are in edited collections speak to different literatures within and across the disciplines of history and sociology. And in fact, there's a detour at one stage in some of our work into reflections on archival practice. But together, as you can see with this model, we've attempted to show the research as intellectual undertakings feeds into the larger project. For example, research on Indigenous labour in vineyards speaks to Indigenous and labour histories in Australia and globally, and Native Animals as Pests in Vineyards is located within Australian Environmental History. Research on introduction wines and changing Australian taste for wine is based in a studies approach to class and gender. So some of our research appears only in the book, that is that main centre of the globules of our model there, and we may also draw on this material later to produce further journal articles. So one of the non-traditional outputs in is our series of more than 20 oral history interviews, and a research assistant is currently editing the interviews to build our content for our YouTube channel, which will go live early next year. We're going to screen these for the industry partners at the same time as we screen for them a film that we have actually discovered was shot in the Hunter Valley in the late 1960s with some really famous actors that's been forgotten, and we've revived this film, and we'll give it an audience again as part of our project. Our approach to the monograph narrative, which is a really key form of communicating the Hunter's historical capital to general readers, to the industry, and to academics. Our approach to this is captured in this table of contents, which is on the left-hand side of the slide here. It's possibly a little difficult to read those titles, but just briefly, we've divided the narrative into two parts. So first, we look at generations, which is our preference to focusing on the idea of founders and just firsting the whole story. We want to look at, we are looking at generations across that period from the 1820s to the 1980s, because each of those generations has particular characters and particular characteristics. So the first chapter of the first part of the book is called Indigenous Country into Wine Country, with the arrival of settler capitalists in the 1820s. And then we've identified as an original part of our project the characteristics of certain generations up to the 1980s, and we've named them. There are some correlations with economic waves, booms and busts through that period, but what we wanted to do was look at these generations on their own terms. So within the context of what's happening nationally, globally, and thematically, but on their own terms. So this has involved historical sociological methodologies that identify the characteristics of each generation using the wine complex and some other modes of analysis. In the second section of the book, which we've called Vines, Wine and Identity, we look at each of the themes across generations that relate more to a traditional type of wine narrative. So we look at vines, we look at winemaking, we look at selling wine, and we look at how identity and reputation emerge for the Hunter Valley over time. So identity being what it is that, or who it is that the region thinks it is, and reputation being how people from outside consider the region. So that's things like wine shows, international exhibitions, people visiting, and publications in the wine world about the Hunter Valley. So we address both traditional and non-traditional ways of looking at a wine region. Also just pointing out that what you can see on the screen there is a labour record from about 1891. So it's it's in an archive in Sydney. I really love this artefact, and we're hoping to use it for the museum exhibition. We'd have to borrow it to do that. But what you can see there is a little squashed grape on the page. It's a tiny little grape, but it's been preserved for 125 years, possibly. So an exciting and unexpected part of our project is that the Australian Genome Research Facility will, at no charge, test that grape if the conservators at the library where this artefact is based will allow it. So we're very excited that we're not just talking about people and place. There are some other elements of the project that have emerged that we haven't expected, and we're quite excited about this as an unusual artefact to have found. So our project funding ends in April 2018, by which time each of the major outputs will be completed except that the launch of the book and the opening of the museum exhibition will happen simultaneously. That's going to be the 4th of August 2018. So to finish now, some conclusions. We have found that the historical capital of the Hunter region, Hunter wine region, is accessible through industry collaboration with researchers in the humanities and social sciences, using theories such as the wine complex and the histoire croisée approach, and taking the perspective that using many different research techniques and tools, we can draw together a new understanding of the region. So we are answering a "who do you think you are" question for a wine region in this project, and we believe this complements geographical indications as a frame for understanding wine region identity. This is significant as geographical indications have become very powerful markers of the spaces of wine and food production as intellectual property globally, but the supporting narratives for that often need to be historically researched, and there is, until now, as far as we can tell, no historical research by an historian, and then that additional benefit of sociological knowledge and expertise drawn into that process. So we feel, in fact, created a sense of historical indications. Our project could be replicated for tourism organisations at regional or national levels seeking a coherent narrative of origins or true stories. Of course, a cost-benefit analysis of replicating the project would be case-specific. Finally, I'm more than happy to answer questions about the project by email and perhaps set up a Skype meeting if you are interested to hear more. Best wishes to you all for a fruitful conference.